As we prepare for October Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, we introduce you this week to a group that walks with couples who are experiencing that unique and all too common grief. Here's this week's Pro-Life Focus. Michaelene Fredenburg is on a mission to shatter the silence surrounding pregnancy loss. She is founder and president of Life Perspectives, a non-political, non-religious group providing education and research to health professionals and care providers so they can better support families who experience pregnancy loss. I sat down with Fredenburg in Southern California to hear what she wants people to know about this common cross. Michaelene Fredenburg, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
I'm so grateful to see you again. As we are entering now into Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, what is it that you want our viewers to know about the reality of pregnancy loss?
I think pregnancy loss happens more than we even think that it does. So about 1 in 4 pregnancies will actually end in miscarriage, which is about 1 million miscarriages every year in the United States. And then there are other types of pregnancy loss as well. But I think because our culture is so silent about it, that most people are really shocked to hear the numbers and to realize that there's so many people around us who are personally impacted.
And as you mentioned, pregnancy loss can take different forms.
Yes, well, and certainly in an early pregnancy loss, we can also think about loss through abortion, later in pregnancy, stillbirth, early infant death. There's about 1 in 6 couples who are struggling with infertility right now. Birth families and adoptive families, there's grief there. Amongst the joy of adoption, there's also grief as well.
Yeah, that's important to remember. Based on your work at Life Perspectives, how does grief impact a couple? What is it that you're hearing firsthand?
Well, and certainly I think it's first good to point out that every couple is going to respond differently. We're all really unique in the experience and in our reaction to it. I think it's really important to know that, because otherwise we put a lot of shoulds on ourselves or on other people, and we certainly don't want to do that. But we have found, both through people sharing with us and through research, that there are some themes that tend to be similar. One of them is just the grief reaction can really be quite intense, quite severe, and sometimes for a very long time, especially when that loss is not acknowledged by others. So they feel that they aren't given permission to grieve the loss of their child. And then there's some other things we notice too. So in addition to grieving the loss of that child, there's also this grieving the loss of hopes and dreams for the future, right? What I've attached to kind of the picture of maybe my future family, my future children, as well as this child in particular. There also tends to be this sense of failure at really the most basic level. So I think, especially in our culture, I think we tend to think we can have children on demand, right? How many we want, when we want them. And when that doesn't happen, we are so unprepared for a reproductive loss that we feel like we've done something wrong. We blame ourselves. And that sense of failure can really hit each of those individually, but then together as a couple.
Life Perspectives offers resources to families experiencing pregnancy loss with 2 different websites, abortionchangesyou.com and miscarriagehurts.com. Here, anyone who has experienced the pains of pregnancy loss can anonymously submit their stories as a way to help heal. The submitted stories are heartbreaking. I can't express the pain that I feel. It's been 2 months now since I lost my baby, and I cannot get over the pain I feel every time I see a mom with their newborn in their hands or a pregnant mommy. I hate myself for resenting those beautiful moms who have no fault in my loss. And another anonymous submission. I scheduled the first ultrasound. 2 days before my appointment, I started spotting. Then I started bleeding. That night, an ER doctor confirmed I was miscarrying. I was 10 weeks pregnant. He told me it wasn't my fault. It was nothing I did. But it's hard to believe that when it was my body who rejected the pregnancy. The team at Life Perspectives studied all the submissions and tracked the amount of time it took for a couple to experience pregnancy loss before they opened up to share their story.
in that finding, there was a majority who disclosed after a year, so they had waited a whole year to talk about it. The longest was 47 years ago, and you kind of had everything in between. And for those who did wait a year or longer, the incidence of them talking about depression, anxiety, PTSD, maybe abusing alcohol, even some eating disorders, the incidence was much higher than for those who had disclosed earlier.
Oh, my goodness, that's heartbreaking to hear all of that. For our viewers who maybe they have not personally experienced a pregnancy loss, but they know someone who has, what guidance do you want to give them on how they can best be there for their loved one? I feel like so many people are afraid to say anything.
And I think it's really understandable. We understand instinctively that miscarriage is something that would impact someone at a really deep level, but it seems so personal and potentially painful that I often hear, I don't want to make it worse. And to me, that makes so much sense. That's actually coming from a place of care and compassion. I think what we don't realize, and this is why I'm so glad we're talking about it, is that not saying anything is actually the most painful response of all. Because for that couple, when you have a culture who's silent, who isn't even really acknowledging that they have just lost a child, when those closest to them don't do that either, you can just imagine it compounds the pain, potentially the trauma. I think it's also really confusing, right? So like, this is so painful for me, but the world keeps moving on, and those closest to me don't even seem to be noticing. So I think really one of the most important things is to acknowledge that loss. And we can do that very simply. There aren't magic words, but saying that I'm sorry. And I think we can say that with our words. We can be present with someone, whether they want to talk or they don't want to talk. But then we can also think of what are some things that we would typically do, like send a card, maybe a piece of jewelry or a candle or something that would be meaningful for that family.
Is there something specific that someone should not say to a couple who is grieving a pregnancy loss?
Right. And yes, and I can think of a number of them. And I think unfortunately, because we hear these things in popular culture, we don't know what to say. And then maybe if we say something, we just kind of fall into that groove.
Yeah.
So certainly anything that would minimize. So saying like, oh, well, it's so common. Or you know what, maybe there was something wrong with the baby and this was God's way of taking care of it, which we've actually heard that. For those who have a faith background, even making a comment if you have an angel in heaven may not be what they need to hear at that time. It seems like we're just brushing it aside when the thing is they want their baby here now. They don't want to wait until later. So those are some of the things that it'd be wise to avoid that. And I would always say be much simpler. Saying that I'm sorry, you're not alone, I'm here for you, what can I do to help?
It seems like so much of it is just being present.
Absolutely.
I can't help but notice you are wearing that forget-me-not pin, and I understand that's part of your group's effort to raise awareness about the reality of pregnancy loss. Tell us about that latest initiative.
Yes. Well, and we've wanted for a while as a team, and we've had others suggest to us, like there should be some sort of symbol. There should be a symbol to say that, you're not alone, that I remember your children with you, that I'm a safe place for you to talk to me about this. And so we have thought about that for a long time, but we always feel like it's not something you just make up. It needs to be something that's meaningful and resonates with people. And so it was suggested that, well, really, research shows that one of the biggest obstacles is this fear in the healing process, grieving that my child will be forgotten. And so if we can just let them know that we remember that they're not forgotten, which then one of our team members said, there's a flower, the forget-me-not. And we thought, oh my goodness. And we spent actually the last year asking people in different situations what they thought about it. And it just really resonated with individuals. And I think it says so much and does it in a gentle and a beautiful way. And I think in time, we're hoping that we can do that, especially in October and Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month.
It's that simple way to start a conversation. Michaelene, if there's a viewer who's watching and he or she has experienced a pregnancy loss, what's your message to that person?
Right. Well, I definitely would want them to know that they really are not alone, and that there are those who want to support them and want to remember them, and then obviously remember their children with them, and to let them know that there's no way to erase the pain, or the grief, but there really is a pathway through it that they can move through, and they can do that with the support of others. Grieving is definitely something that's very unique to the individual, but there's an aspect of grief that's communal. So if they can at least have one other person who can journey with them.
Thank you so much for your leadership and just your wisdom on this most important issue. Michaelene Fredenburg, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You can find a forget-me-not pin like the one I'm wearing and more information about pregnancy loss at lifeperspectives.com. Thank you to Michaelene and her team for helping to shatter the silence around pregnancy loss so we can have more healing in this world.